Greetings, precious soul. Thank you very much for joining. It's wonderful to have you with us. Let's talk today about reality and learning and conflict resolution. Because if we have a strong understanding of reality and learning and conflict resolution, that potentially can take us very far in helping to build a better life for everyone, including ourselves, in healing the world, and expanding the harmony across the universe. So let's get started. It's important to always recognize that words are inherently approximate, especially within spiritual discussions. And words being inherently approximate, it's crucial that we always listen with our hearts. We always want to listen with our hearts, especially in spiritual discussions. And we also always want to be discerning and to only accept that as true, which resonates with our conscience. We want our conscience to be our guide and everything else to be advisory. Now, it may resonate with you that at the end of the day, everyone is both a student and a teacher, and that every one of our actions or inactions in the long run amounts to an experiment of discovery. No matter what we're doing, we're in the long run learning from it and accumulating knowledge. So if we start out with a certain limited understanding of the nature of love, limited wisdom, limited experience, a certain understanding of the nature of love, then over the long run, we accumulate to a wider understanding, a greater depth of experience, more knowledge, more capabilities of the nature of love. So again, each of us are both students and teachers at different stages and amidst different local paths of the same overall learning process. And we can see a visualization of that here. We can imagine many different paths, all that are progressing the same way in the long run, but that are nuanced in the details, and where the souls that are taking those paths are at different stages at any given time. So for any given soul, we can see that there are many possibilities that are available to them, including going side to side, including backtracking, maybe even substantially backtracking, but in the long run, always migrating toward a greater understanding. There are souls ahead of us, and there are souls behind us. We're the student of those ahead of us, and we're the teacher of those behind us. And so it's important that we have an ethic that relates to that. So if we're looking at those who are behind us, and instead of helping them, instead of teaching them, we're fearful of them, and we call them, quote, evil, and we try to put them in cages, we try to incarcerate them, we try to restrict their free will, is that how we want to be treated by our teachers? Do we want them to fear us and run away from us and call us evil and restrict our freedom? Or do we want to treat our students the way that our teachers are treating us? If our teachers are taking time to explain things to the extent that we're willing to listen, and if they're also allowing us to freely go out and explore and struggle and learn on our own, because they trust us, they trust our maturity, they understand that we're making this progression in the long run toward love, and that even if we make what might be called mistakes along the way, that we're learning from them and advancing in the long run. If they're taking time to help us, to listen to us, to pull us forward, and also fully respect our freedom in the process, if that's how they're treating us, and we appreciate that, then isn't that how we should treat our own students? Now we have here a very profound quote from Beam. Beam is a member of an extraterrestrial civilization that posts on Twitter. The Twitter account is Sandia Wisdom, all one word, Sandia Wisdom. And the civilization is known as the pon-Tee. The pon-Tee are from the fifth planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli II. They've been posting on Twitter for years, and Beam is a member of their crew. And Beam posted this message. It's very profound. I have it framed here, and there's a lot of wisdom that I believe we can read into it. So let's go through that process. Often education accompanies necessary persuasion, and these, education and persuasion, are best assisted by poignancy and humor. So what this means is that every engagement between souls is a mutual learning experience of persuasion. A younger soul may be persuaded of further spiritual wisdom by an older soul, and in the same process, the older soul may be persuaded of new and innovative ways to help the younger souls. So it's a mutual learning process. It's also conceivable that the older soul may be mistaken in what they're teaching, in which case the younger soul is directly teaching them and the roles may be reversed. But at either rate, no matter what the situation is, both sides are learning, and persuasion is the mechanism by which they're ultimately learning. Now, education often accompanies persuasion. That's just sort of common sense, that if we're trying to share wisdom, that sort of speaking the wisdom to somebody else, communicating in a rather direct manner and having that information received on the other side is a rather commonsensical way of doing things. However, if the other side is not receptive to receiving that communication, then that sort of eliminates education from the process. So if the student is unwilling to receive the guidance from the teacher, then if the student sort of goes out on their own, then they're doing what could be described as learning the hard way. They're experimenting on their own. Maybe they'll be fortunate and make very few mistakes and not even need the teacher, and that's fine. But they also could make some substantial mistakes, in which case they could be learning from poignancy. So we have humor and poignancy here. If there's information that the student largely already knows, then humor can be helpful in establishing that, yes, this information is already obviously known. We can laugh about it, and nothing to debate here. We've already got that covered. On the other hand, if the student goes the opposite direction and is quite passionately opposed to what the teacher is proposing, and the student resists it and proposes every argument against it, not because they're trying to be disruptive or argumentative, but because they really believe what they're saying, and they want to believe what's true, and they are simply not persuaded by what the teacher is proposing, and perhaps they even leave the classroom. Poignancy would be the approach there. Now, assuming that what the teacher is proposing is correct, and if the student is insistent that the teacher is wrong, then effectively the student is venturing out and learning the hard way to eventually take the other side of that equation. And again, the student could be right, the teacher could be wrong. The paths are not continuously forward in this journey, but for the sake of discussion, if the student is effectively debating valid wisdom and is highly resistant to that wisdom, to the point that they are unteachable in terms of education from the other soul, then sort of going out on their own, making what could be locally called a mistake and regretting it, the process of poignancy would be helpful in the long run to enable them to make the transition, to grow, to change, and to acquire that additional knowledge. So if the student voluntarily chooses to decline educational cooperation, then their path centers upon poignancy, and it centers upon regret. And again, we don't really need to harp on this, but if we can avoid regret, wouldn't that be advantageous? So it makes sense to be cooperative and to learn from our teachers to the extent that we can, recognizing, as we started out saying, that we always want to be true to our conscience, and if the teacher is simply not persuasive, then at the end of the day, our conscience may require us to go out on our own and try to prove what we're insistent upon, and maybe succeed in doing that. And if not, then succeed in learning whatever the truth is and contributing that to the overall knowledge base in the long run. So let's keep in mind this idea of poignancy and regret and switch gears a little bit. If we look at the motivation of what every soul is doing in terms of their engagement with another soul, we could say that at the end of the day, when one soul engages with another, ultimately they're seeking respect. And they can do that either by dominance through fear, which amounts to mistrust, or by appreciation through love, which amounts to trust. So they can seek respect by being feared, or they can seek respect by being loved, in a more direct sense through appreciation. The path of fear amounts to ultimately collapsing their universe by chasing away their needed help amidst innate interdependence, and the path of appreciation, the path of love, amounts to expanding the universe by facilitating harmony, recognizing our innate interdependence. The path of mistrust is terminal, transient, temporary, and the path of trust is powerful, permanent, and perpetual. So again, it speaks to the importance of looking ahead before sort of rushing headlong into something. If we can recognize that we are inherently interdependent, that everything we're doing, whether it's resting or taking action, is dependent upon trust of, say, the molecules we're breathing, trust of the students that we're teaching, that they aren't going to be objectionably disruptive, trust of the knowledge of our mentors. No matter what we're doing, whether it's active or inactive, whether it's with our students or our teachers, it takes place in the venue of trust. In fact, we don't really have any existence outside the context of trust. So the idea that we're going to eliminate trust, we're going to dominate the universe by just being ourselves, ultimately means that we won't exist because our existence is inherently interdependent. So if we can see that in advance, we can save ourselves and others potentially a lot of heartache by just migrating toward love in the conventional sense directly. Fear could be described as love of self, self above others, and love in the classical sense could be described as love of others ahead of self. Technically, they're both love, but love of others first is the more classical definition, the philosophy along the lines of the captain being the last one off the ship, whereas love of self would be self-centeredness, although it does have a role in the grand scheme, because if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't shower when we get up in the morning, if we don't provide basic care of ourselves, we aren't going to be able to help others in the long run either. So there are these two paths of seeking respect that again amount to either fear or love in the classical sense. The fear path perpetuates conflict and suffering, and the love path perpetuates harmony and prosperity. Now, regardless of whether the path of fear or the path of love, the path of dominance or appreciation is taken, regardless of which path is taken, both the paths of fear and love are requests for perceived respect. So every soul is ultimately seeking respect, and regardless of what path they're taking, they want to perceive that respect as arriving. And so if the soul that is seeking respect does not perceive that they are receiving that respect, then they will continue to perceive a conflict. Even if the soul that they're observing does not perceive any conflict, if a soul wants respect and it is not perceiving respect, then that soul will perceive and, in a certain sense, perpetuate the conflict. We can discuss a variety of scenarios here. So one could rightfully defend their sacred, personal, creative space. We all need our creative liberty in order to have identities. So one could defend their creative space and exercise their autonomy to effectively affirm that this is my creative space and it is my territory. However, that could be perceived as disrespectful. Even if it's not, it could be perceived as disrespectful and therefore perpetuate the conflict. Or even more crucially, no matter what a soul does, for the most part, it could be perceived as disrespectful, and of course that could seem very confining to the soul that is not intending any conflict at all, and yet whatever they do is perceived as disrespectful. And there could be a further version of that, where they could be perceived as disrespectful based upon the biases of many other parties, too many parties to manage all at one time. So in these difficult situations where a soul is being perceived as disrespectful by many other souls on a false basis, too many other souls to even address individually, what approach might they take? And there is an answer to that. So let's take a look at what it could be. And we'll lead into it with these points. There is safety in numbers, and there is safety in powerful allies. And of course, there is safety in understanding the true nature of reality, which is spiritual. So if we take that knowledge that reality is spiritual, we can contemplate that everybody is constantly being watched by our soul family that has extreme wisdom and extreme numbers across the universe. And we can envision that those who have pure hearts, who are internally seeking the deepest harmony with everyone in the face of all adversity, those who have loving patience that are exactly serving as the necessary divinity within physical reality, and that those who are collaborative in nature and appreciate everything as a long-range gift, people that have pure hearts, the deepest harmony with everyone in the face of adversity, loving patience, that are constituting divinity within their physical reality, that are collaborative, easy to work with, and appreciate everything that's done in support of them, that these people would be dream collaborators for our spiritual family, dream collaborators, and in prime position to attract powerful and prompt support. So even if in the visible world it appears that you may be very outnumbered and alone, that is never necessarily the case in the wider world, the infinite world, that has access ultimately to everything. Now, there are no guarantees. Anything is possible. An aggressor could theoretically kill anyone anytime. However, if they were to do that, they would not necessarily be able to withstand potentially infinite allies of yours who are standing up for you afterward and or beforehand, potentially over and over and over and over and over and over and over until the former aggressor voluntarily recognizes that, harmony is the only practical path forward. What we're proposing here is that full-hearted trust in infinite perfect love, one way or another in the long run, always does prevail. Unconditional love is the strongest force in the universe, and if that's what we're reliant upon, in one way or another, sooner or later, that will prevail. So the idea here is not to be effortless cannon fire, not to just be a blind martyr and fall away when somebody is aggressive against you, because to do that would be complicit in the wrongdoing. If you just fall over and agree with the first wrong thing that comes along, what's the difference between that and doing it yourself? Now, what we're proposing may look very similar to that in outward appearance. However, it's different in inward appearance. The idea is not to just fall over and be complicit in wrongdoing. The idea is to utilize our wisdom of how spiritual reality actually works, so that our internal, pure-hearted pursuit of harmony with everyone and our gracious, innate proxy, subconscious, it doesn't require any conscious intent, our internal, innate, gracious interest in spiritual support can effectively help manifest a long-range, invisible suit of armor according to the highest, most proper, most right-minded will of the universe. So even though outwardly we may look very vulnerable, and in a sense we may be, at a deeper internal level, we're very aware of what we're doing, we're aware of the risks at play, and we're aware of the spiritual collaboration that surrounds us. We're aware that nothing takes place by chance, and that everything is going to harmonize in the long run, and that there are more scenarios than we can conceptualize that could be instantly activated to deliver a wonderful future for us. And we're engaging in trust with our spiritual family. We're doing the work of divinity within the physical realm, and we're collaborating together, them in the spirit realm, us in the physical realm, as a team to deliver the nature of divinity across reality. That sounds like a very good formula for harmony, and in one context or another, a beautiful outcome will arise, because that's the nature of reality. So if we go back to the quote here from Beam, and we focus upon the idea of poignancy and regret, and we tie that in with what we just discussed, we can see the synthesis of this discussion. The concept is to wisely implement loving patience, constituting the presence of divinity within physical reality, prudently trusting the wisdom and power of our infinite family, in ultimately, and this is the point here, converting aggression toward you into poignancy and regret. So in other words, if somebody is being aggressive against you, because that is the mode of learning that they're insistent upon, then what they're effectively doing is they're digging themselves a big trench of karmic debt. And as soon as that aggression is recategorized as poignancy and regret, then it helps them to move forward. So the idea is that if we appeal to the spiritual realm to facilitate that transition properly, right-mindedly, in harmony with the greatest wisdom and will of the universe, that's a path forward. In other words, we don't need to understand the technical details of how really anything works. We just need a pure-hearted spirituality and a confident trust in the balance of our spiritual family, that we, on the front lines of physical reality, and that those in the spiritual realm are working together to achieve our common long-range spiritual interests. And we want to recognize that all things are possible, including those beyond our direct imagination, and that no matter how outnumbered we may seem to be in the physical realm, that everything theoretically can just be resolved in a snap through spirituality, and spirituality is absolutely real. And if we are well established within it, we have a lot of friendships, a lot of connectivity to our spiritual elders, which is of course facilitated by the way that we relate to our students. that that's a very strong formula for doing what we're here supposed to be doing, which is activating the will of the divine in the physical realm. The purpose of living is not to call up a gun squad, a police, or a military and, quote, solve things for us, really kick the can down the road while we distract ourselves with entertainment. I mean, isn't that sort of a definition of hell, where we're relying upon weaponry rather than spiritual skill in relating to one another, and then wasting away our time by sort of congratulating ourselves with entertainment after having missed the lesson of experiencing greater knowledge and persuasion? We want to grow in spirituality rather than shy away from it. And even the smallest opportunity in life, if we really dissect it, could be a treasure trove of spiritual riches. And we want to lean into spirituality. That's why we're here. We want to gain knowledge, we want to gain experience, and we want to contribute to the overall collective. We want to be a creator rather than a consumer. It feels much more blessed to give than to receive. And one way that we can do that is to harmonize with our spiritual family, to let them recognize that we trust them, we understand them, we believe in their presence, we recognize their power, we appreciate their interest in helping us, and they appreciate our interest in helping them, and we can work together to accomplish anything. And the more wonders that we create, the more that we can build upon those and achieve even greater wonders in the future. So this is a very profound statement. Again, often education accompanies necessary persuasion, and these are best assisted by poignancy and humor. We don't need militaries, we don't need police, we don't need government. All of those things are directly counter to conscience. A police force that says, do this or I'll shoot you, a military that says, do this or we'll blow you up, a government that says, do this or that or we'll take away your money or we'll put you in a cage. None of those things ever said, filter this through your conscience first. We're all taught as children to adhere to our conscience. The conscience is most supreme, and the whole world agreed with this following World War II in the Nuremberg trials. The Nazis adopted what was called the Nuremberg defense, saying that it was only their responsibility to obey orders, that they could just be, they could operate like soulless robots, just obey orders, and that's all that was expected of them. And the world said, no, that's not the case. You are obligated to adhere to your conscience first, and that's the highest priority. And if people really think about what that means that governments, police, militaries, regardless of all their uniforms and titles and so forth, they really don't have a leg to stand on, because the world has already established that conscience supersedes everything that they're requesting you to do. And at the end of the day, if your conscience supersedes their requests, why do you really need their requests in the first place? I mean, it's important that we have cultural conventions so we can all relate to each other, but the idea that we're going to put each other in cages and pull out guns to make that a reality, the ethics behind that is gone out the window about a century ago if we really think about it. We just need to think about what we've already decided and to harmonize with it. We need to harmonize with the way that reality actually operates. We need to think about justice. The very fact that we're occupying land that was stolen from people who were here thousands of years earlier needs to be brought out into the light. I mean, just because a government formed and violated conscience and told people who were rightfully living here thousands of years in advance, just go away because we think we're better than you and we have more weapons and more willingness to be hostile than you do, that's not ethical justification. We're supposed to live lives that are based upon ethics, not convenience, and we need to do so. Sometimes people ask about extraterrestrial life and our soul family, and they ask why they don't seem to be doing more. They're doing a great deal. They're providing insights along these lines and many, many other insights. They're collaborating telepathically with those who are interested, and they're enabling us to receive this wisdom, to receive this guidance, to receive these options, to recognize that governments are occupying stolen land and that we have an ethical obligation to reverse that injustice. We have an ethical obligation to take care of those who are most in need. We have an ethical obligation to treat souls as equal instead of dollars as equal, let alone the fact that the money is not really keyed to anything in the first place and is curated by a government that doesn't have legitimacy in the first place. We need to do our job of courageously calling a spade and aligning to our conscience. At the end of the day, nobody has dominion over you. Your conscience controls your destiny. You can't really say that because there is a quote evil ruler that I can't do this or that. You always have the options of yes or no, agreeing, disagreeing, complying or not complying. If somebody is quote forcing you to do something unethical, you can just say no and not do it and face the wind with the consequences and potentially rally quite a bit of support for being true to your ethics, whereas somebody else is just being true to obeying orders. That's, at the end of the day, what we're called to do if necessary in order to build a better world. I recognize it's important that we need to fight our battles strategically in terms of, focusing upon big picture issues rather than small things, but the illegitimacy of the world's governments is not a small thing. This is a very tragic situation. People like to think that the more conversations we have, the more that we all grow in wisdom, which is true. It's what we talked about earlier. However, if the wisest people in the room are locked away and kept out of the conversation, in other words, if indigenous folks are restricted to reservations and to induced poverty in order to be kept out of the public eye, out of the public conversation, to keep their knowledge about spirituality, their knowledge about metaphysics, their knowledge about our soul family, to keep all of this world-changing knowledge tucked away and out of sight so the government can have dominion. If the truth is kept concealed from us and we have these learning conversations, the conversations don't really help very much when the smartest people in the room, the most spiritual people in the room, are kept out of the conversation. We need to have the courage to recognize the injustice of locking away our spiritual elders and unlock them, welcome them back if they're willing to return, and be a gracious family and learn from one another and grow together. So we've been gifted wonderful things by our soul family. We've been gifted the knowledge and the opportunities and the nudges to face our liabilities and the encouragement to bravely do so and to grow spiritually within that process. And so that's our obligation. And we, of course, will continue to be appropriately supported in that process, but that is our obligation. Our job is not to sit around, eat popcorn, watch TV, and wait for somebody else to clean up our messes. If the idea was for other souls to clean up our messes, well, the first thing they would do is they'd get rid of the population that's making the messes that doesn't want to lift a finger to help them. That's not the situation. Everything's a team effort. They're providing the resources to enable us to do our job, and when we do our job, that helps them to do their job. All of us are a family. We're working together. We need to help one another, and that's what families do. That's what interdependence means, and that's the process of harmonizing the universe. To wrap this up, if a student insists upon adopting the karmic debt of aggression, then what we're proposing is that may their aggression be persuaded to poignancy most appropriately. And this wish may not only help you in all situations, but it may help the entire universe in all situations. Not only can it help you if you're outnumbered, it can potentially help everybody outnumbered in every situation. So we don't need to really do anything in the physical realm other than to maintain the purity of our wish, and the spiritual realm can collaborate with us to help deliver that reality. So we are doing something, we are contributing through our courage and our intent, and the spiritual realm is contributing through its capabilities and its harmony with our gifts of trust, and we're helping to collaborate in bringing harmony to the entire universe. So this wish of aggression being persuaded appropriately to poignancy can help to restore harmony not only to you and to Gaia, but to the entire universe. Again, if any student insists upon adopting the karmic debt of aggression, what we're proposing is that may their aggression be persuaded to poignancy most appropriately.